It's the Inside Scoop Virginia, all the news Virginians want to know. Now here's the host of Inside Scoop Virginia, George Burke.
Good evening. Welcome to Inside Scoop Virginia. I got a treat for you tonight. My guest is Judy Fader, Democrat for the 10th Congressional District. She's running in a primary against a gentleman named Mike Turner. Judy is the veteran of this race. She ran 2 years ago, raised a great deal of money, ran a very spirited campaign, and she's back again. And I could read you a bio that's about 5 pages long, but I'm not going to, and tell you she holds a BA from Brandeis University, PhD from Harvard. Politics and government were your areas of concentration. She's held positions at the Brookings Institution. She's been with the Urban Institute, and you recently just stepped down, I understand, from Georgetown University.
Stepped down as Dean of Georgetown University's Public Policy Institute.
Correct, and you're tenured, so you're
I'm a professor, right.
And you did spend a little time with the Clinton administration as well,
Indeed,
so you've been all over the place.
And on Capitol Hill as well.
Yeah. Welcome.
Thank you.
Started off, let's just be real simple. You ran once. You made a formidable showing against somebody who's entrenched. What's he been in? He's been in 13 terms or something like that.
He's in his 14th. It's now 27 years.
Mm-hmm. And it's a district that's not quite certainly not as blue as the 8th, and not as blue as we think the 11th is. We'll find out this year. But it's changing dramatically.
Indeed it is.
And you ran, I thought, a very good race, and you're back again. And what's ironic about that district is the two people who held that seat before you, hopefully, Joe Fisher, a Democrat, and Frank Wolf, the Republican, both ran twice to win. Three times to win. They ran twice and then won the third time.
That's correct.
So it's sort of a pattern in that district.
Right. Well, they ran 3 times. We're going to take it in 2.
Good. Well, talk to me a little bit. Tell me why you're running and how you think you're going to win.
It's a pleasure to be with you, first of all.
Thank you.
And I'm running because people in this district, as I believe people all over America, are ready for fundamental change. I talk to people, I've been running now a long time, and talk to people from McLean to Manassas, from Centerville to Winchester, and they really want fundamental change. Think about a woman who talked to me about how she can't retire because she can't find affordable health insurance. Or a young man whose friends were telling me that he had health insurance and he had a good job, but he's going broke because he got very sick and his health insurance is not covering enough. Whether it's health insurance, people seeing their neighbors lose their homes because of the mortgage crisis, or people horrified by the seemingly never-ending war in Iraq, people want change. Frank Wolf, 27 years, I don't think he's going to bring people that change. He's told the voters of the 10th District, elect him again. He's going to keep on failing us just as he's been. I'm running to bring that change.
Clearly a lot of people support your effort to run. You've raised a boatload of money. And some of our viewers may look at that with disdain. I certainly don't, because money is the mother's milk of politics. When you are in a district like the 10th, or any of these Northern Virginia districts, it's very hard to get your message out.
Correct.
And as a result, you need to spend, and we have one of the most expensive media markets in the country. So as a result, you have to spend a lot of money, whether it's in mail, whether it's on the radio, or whether it's on television, just to get people to notice that there's an election going on.
And even having the staff to supervise the folks who are knocking on doors. When I'll knock on a lot of doors myself, but you need to have a staff, and it all takes a lot of resources. And so we're working very hard to have the resources we need to win this race. And we did a good job of making that challenge to Frank Wolf in '06, and we're going to do it again in '08.
Well, I also think that the ability to raise substantial sums of money shows a depth of support.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I find it raising money to win a race is not the favorite activity. I'd much rather be out talking to voters and do a lot of that. But it is very rewarding to hear from so many people, thanks for running again. What can I do for you?
Much of your work in the policy field for several decades has centered on health care and the whole issue, health insurance, the whole health issue. And I, for one, as you do, fear it's really coming to a head. I mean, I have 3 children, 3 grown children. Only one of them has health care on their job. And
trouble.
2 of them don't. Now they're young, and unless something catastrophic befalls them, they can handle it, but we never know. And more, you know, our children aren't going to have the kind of health care we had unless something's done. What's the number now? 46 million Americans? 47 million Americans are uninsured. How do we solve it? I know it's a complex issue, and I'm not going to ask you to get down to the nitty-gritty details. But, you know, give our viewers a feel. How do we solve this problem?
Well, George, it's not just, as you say, the 47 million who don't have health insurance. There are roughly an equal number of Americans who have health insurance, but as I said, are at risk of going broke if they get sick because their insurance isn't covering the services that doctors prescribe.
Underinsured, as they call it.
Exactly, underinsured. And when there's I want to urge you we got to do something about your kids, because anybody, doesn't matter how old you are. I mean, I'm more likely, you're more likely to get sick than our kids are, but it can happen to anybody anytime. We've got to guarantee every American health insurance. It's got to be health insurance that has benefits that will really give us the access to care that we need when we need it. So it can't be letting the health insurers decide what to cover and cover a toothbrush and call it health insurance. It has to be real. People should be able to get that insurance by staying in their current plan, because many do have coverage in their jobs they'll want to keep. But they also need another place where they can get it if they don't get it through their jobs. It can be a public plan or a private plan, and they need to be able to get it there without discrimination or paying higher rates because of pre-existing conditions. I don't know about you, but I'm riddled with pre-existing conditions, and we need to be able to get that coverage when we need it. It's got to be affordable. It's got to be, that means that it's got to be subsidized for people with limited incomes, because a good family policy today costs on average about $12,000. About 2/3 of the uninsured have family incomes less than $40,000. You can't pay $12,000 on a $40,000 income. You can pay something, but you need good, strong subsidies. And we've got to make it affordable by getting value for the dollar in our healthcare system. We need to refocus on prevention, on managing chronic diseases, on getting 21st century information technology so there isn't all that repeated tests and drugs you shouldn't be taking. We need to make it make sense. And we need an investment in public leadership, in research and information for doctors on what works and what doesn't. Research shows, and I find this horrifying, see how you react, that we only get the right treatment in cases where we know what that is. We only get it about 50% of the time. It's no better than a coin toss. We can do better than that. We need to do better than that. And we can.
I was listening, NPR has done a series in the last couple of weeks on how different countries' healthcare systems work. First of all, it's horrifying to find out that we're way down the totem pole compared to many other nations in terms of providing the cost of services to citizens. It doesn't mean we're way down the totem pole in terms of the quality of services and the medical care.
Well, actually, the way down, we're way up on what it costs per person. And where we're way down is we've got higher death rates. We are less able than people in other countries to be able to see a doctor on a given day. So we're paying a lot more and not getting the value that we ought to be. But I would tell you what we need is an American system, and we can do it.
I agree. You know, Japan, it sounded great. It costs almost nothing to go to the doctors. It costs almost nothing to go to the hospital. But then you heard the doctors speaking, and they didn't have enough money to run their hospitals and to keep the hospitals stocked and to keep the hospitals staffed, to the point where doctors were opening little hospitals of their own.
Interesting.
So there were chinks in that system as well. It's refreshing to talk to someone who is so incredibly knowledgeable about this issue. I've talked to a lot of people on this show and elsewhere on it. It's just, to me, it's just such a critical issue.
Well, and the thing is that it's not that it's so hard to figure out what we have to have. What's hard is bringing people together in order to get there. What we really need to do is elect people, a strong president and a Congress in which the members of Congress are willing to get the job done, are going to do what it takes. And that means knowing what it takes to have a real plan, which is what I just laid out, and then working with others to make it happen. You don't come in with just one idea and push it. You work together.
Some people argue that we have to be very careful. We don't dismantle our existing system. I don't think anyone's talking about doing that. I mean, we have world-class hospitals. You know, last year I went through a serious medical episode, some of it through no fault of my own. But I ended up, it was really my first foray into the healthcare system. I'd never been in a hospital before, et cetera, and I got great care. I got absolutely great care from the doctors that I dealt with, from the whole system, so it worked. I've got gold-plated health insurance. And I guess that helps as well. But nonetheless, the people involved were definitely involved, they were definitely dedicated, et cetera. So the system is there, it just has to be reined in and put together in some fashion that everyone is covered.
It needs to make sense. Everybody's frustrated with it, the doctors, the hospitals, as well as us patients. And so what we need to do is get it right so that everybody's in it, in a system that doesn't discriminate against you based on when you're sick, and that pays adequately so that we encourage the range of providers that we need to really be there for us when we're sick. And in terms of getting it done, what we know from experience is that the stakeholders who don't want to see change do a terrifyingly good job of scaring us that change is going to make us worse off, not better off. I don't think that we're going to take that anymore. I think that people recognize that we need fundamental change, and I'm running to bring it. And
they also do a very good job of effectively pressuring the political process to slow things down.
They can stand in the way instead of making things go forward, which is why you need politicians, you need to elect people who are committed.
Well, I really hope that, I feel confident that if you're elected, and let's even say when you're elected, that you will be in the middle of this.
That's, well, absolutely.
I don't think there's any doubt.
It's both my intent and my experience, because I've spent decades working with members of Congress and with advocacy organizations and others in order to bring change, and that is recognized, and now I think I can do it best by being one of those members of Congress, and so I'm looking forward to that. And I'm actually working with a number of advocacy groups right now to create a movement, a call for enactment of the health insurance system that I'm talking about, the changes that I'm talking about, so that when I'm elected and when others are elected, we will hold us all accountable for delivering that change.
I'm sure Speaker Pelosi will recognize that. We are coming to our first 2-minute break. Hang on, we'll be back. Again, my guest today is Judy Fader, Democratic candidate for the 10th District here in Virginia, 10th Congressional District.
How far would you go to help someone? Would you go to the end of your driveway? Would you cross a street? Would you cross an ocean? To a place 6,000 miles from home? And how long would you go? Would you go for a week? A month? A year? Would you go for 2 years? Would you go if you could use your knowledge to teach someone, and in the process, maybe learn something yourself. Life is calling. How far will you go? Peace Corps.
James, don't forget your helmet.
Will do.
Not a helmet. Your bike helmet.
Oh, okay. Hi, I'm James Thrash with the Washington Redskins. On the football field, a helmet is an important piece of equipment. I also wear another helmet that's just as important. A bike helmet. It's the most important piece of equipment you'll have the next time you're out on your bike. Wear yours and make sure your kids do too. Safety first with the Skins.
Monica and her friends want you to know that you should never get near a dog when it is eating, playing with a favorite toy, or sleeping. It's really important to make time for exercise and games and keep your dog's vaccines up to date. Never leave a dog in a small, confined space. This can make dogs aggressive like Monica. If you follow this advice, you and your dog can play safely and happily together.
Now back to the Inside Scoop, Virginia. Call in live and let your voice be heard. Here again, your host, George Burke.
Welcome back. I'd tell you our phone number, but I've just received word from our director that the phones are dead. However, you can, I don't know what's wrong with them, but that's a technical problem that's beyond my control. You can send emails if you have questions for Judy. I'm sure a lot of you do. You can send them to jims@nova.org. So if you want to communicate, they'll put your emails up on the screen where I can see them, and I will pose your questions to Judy. Again, my guest is Judy Fader, 10th District Democratic candidate in the 10th Congressional District, which is a wide swath of Northern Virginia to the west of Fairfax, and it contains a part of Fairfax, McLean and
Great
parts
Falls,
of Drainesville and Great Falls and the like
and
as well.
And goes out through Loudoun and all the way out to Winchester and down to Front Royal near West Virginia.
Let's get back into another issue. We could talk health care all day.
It's true, but there are lots of other things we need to change. Absolutely.
But it's been fascinating just the few times we've talked previously about this issue, how much you truly know about it. Let's talk about the war in Iraq. You know, we got to do something. We've lost well over, what, 4,000 Americans now. It's an untold number of Iraqis, most of them innocent civilians. And, you know, that's what happens in time of war, unfortunately. I think we could probably pay for everybody's health insurance if we wasn't spending the money we were spending in Iraq. How do we get out of it?
Oh, we have got to bring the troops home. And we've got to bring them home. What I believe is that we need to start bringing them home now and commit to bringing them all out by the end of '09. Our men and women in uniform are doing a wonderful job. I believe that we owe them a tremendous debt, and they make us very proud. But the problem in Iraq is a political problem. Everyone recognizes that. And we need a political solution. What we need is what Senator Hagel has called is a diplomatic surge. We need to make it clear to the Iraqis that we are leaving so that we create the pressure on them and the pressure on the states in the region with whom we will work to recognize that they've got to solve this problem because we're getting out. And we've got to take better care of our troops when they come home.
No doubt.
I mean, we've been talking about health care, and it breaks your heart to see what is happening to many of our soldiers when they come home in terms of not getting the health care they need. We've got to give them health care, and I believe we also have to commit to Senator Jim Webb's GI Bill for the 21st century so that we commit to their education.
Even in terms of the Iraqis, two things. First of all, the civilians, many of them lived a middle-class existence. Granted, you know, that Saddam was a bad guy. We'll all agree with that. But there's lots of bad guys around the world. You know, I have friends who are of Iraqi descent. They still have relatives over there. They lived a middle-class existence, and now they don't have any electricity most of the time. They live in fear, and their middle-class existence, for at least temporarily, has been destroyed. Yeah. Meanwhile, you know, and I agree with you on the troops. Thank God we don't have the same kind of attitude we had when our men and women were coming back from Vietnam. I mean, everyone recognizes they're doing a job. They're doing the job that they were hired to do. They're doing the job that they're sworn to do.
Well, and I have some direct experience of that, because in the program that I've run at Georgetown, we developed a special relationship with the Pentagon, with military captains, majors who have been in the field. The Joint Chiefs are bringing them back into the Pentagon for rotations to spend some time in the Pentagon, and wanted them to get some training at the education at the same time. And so they're getting a master's, an executive master's in public policy at Georgetown. And these men and women are terrific. And working with them has been a privilege, working with them on the policy process, understanding how policy is made. It's a part of their leadership training, both foreign and domestic policy. But I will tell you that a couple of months ago, we laid a wreath at Arlington for one of our alums who was killed in Iraq. And we're doing them a disservice, our young people.
Well, even those who are coming back, I mean, you know, everyone knows about the Walter Reed story now. The Washington Post won a Pulitzer for it. But I, for one, do not believe that it's a situation where the Army or the military, whatever branch, is turning their backs. I think they're overwhelmed. I think we have a situation where many of these men and women coming back with egregious injuries would have been dead in Vietnam.
Yes, I think there are many more coming back, I think, that are surviving their wounds. But I would challenge you a little bit on that. I think that there's been a real failure in terms of the management of their health care.
Do you think it was deliberate, though, or do you think it was just...
Well, I think that when I look at, if you look at the failure after Katrina, or you look at the failure of the Iraq War in general, I think these failures reflect the current administration's lack of concern about running government well. And I think we see it time after time. We see it in the mortgage crisis. No matter where you look, you see it. And I think we have reason to expect good performance of our government, but that means that the people we elect and the people that we hire have to run it well. We've talked a little bit about being in and out of government. I have enormous respect for civil servants. I think that they, like the military, are doing their jobs. It takes committed political leadership who want to bring results, who want to manage well, to deliver results, and we haven't seen that from the Bush administration, and members of Congress have let that happen, including Frank Wolf.
We certainly have incompetence at the top.
There's no doubt about that.
You know, Hurricane Katrina was a shock to all of our systems, I think, the way it was handled. And it gave, I mean, I've known many political appointees who are fabulous and worked, you know, many political appointees come into the government and they can make, as many members of Congress, they can make a heck of a lot more money on the outside.
Yes.
They come in to do public service. And many of them are good, but then you get the Brownies, the Michael Browns, and I'm not going to name a bunch of names. I don't want to get sued for libel, but there are lots of people who come in who had nothing but political hacks.
Yeah, well,
and we've seen more of that in these Republican administrations than we ever saw in the Democratic administrations.
And I think that you see a tremendous undermining of civil servants. I think you've seen it in EPA with the environmental policy. You've seen it in the FDA, Food and Drug Administration. You've seen it in consumer safety. It is the civil servants have been undermined. They are not given the leadership and the resources to do their jobs, and I think that's absolutely true in terms of managing the health care of our military, and we need to do better by them.
We definitely do. They've made a tremendous sacrifice on our behalf, and we have to now take care of them. We've got a couple of minutes before the break. Let's move to that education piece, Webb's GI Bill, 21st century GI Bill, is that what he calls it? What would it do?
It would provide a paid-for education in state schools for our military based on their terms of service. And one of the things there are two things that it addresses, and perhaps more than that. One is that current protections for GIs don't cover the full cost of tuition. They've not kept pace with the cost of tuition.
Unlike when my father came home from excuse me, my father came home from World War II.
Yeah.
His education was basically paid for.
Yeah, and look what a difference it made to people coming back and rebuilding their lives. We need to do that for our soldiers. It's also true that the National Guard are not given the same treatment under existing law.
Even though we're treating them as if they're not citizen soldiers right now. They're full-fledged soldiers.
They're full-fledged soldiers, and they need to have better treatment.
It was a shock to many of their systems. Some of them are going through even more hardship than regular Army folks because they're not used to it.
That's right.
They weren't expecting it.
No. And it's undermined our capacity at home to deal with natural disasters. So the war was irresponsible in so many ways, and one of the consequences is that it has undermined our National Guard. It has undermined and weakened our military. The military leadership knows that we're stretched way too thin, and clearly it is affecting all our families.
The other piece in terms of the National Guard is when they go over there, they bring all their equipment over.
Yeah.
And when they come back, they leave it.
That's right.
So, you know, if you have an incident, whether it's in Virginia, I don't know how bad it is in Virginia, but look at Kansas.
I was thinking of Kansas too, and
they had that tornado
That's right, that's right.
And not only did they barely had enough people, they didn't have the equipment that they needed to move all the mess that was created by the tornado.
And when you think about how the families are suffering, I'm thinking about I spoke to some parents in Manassas who told me that their son was on his second tour of duty in Iraq, and I asked how he was doing. They said he was coping okay, but his wife and their kids needed him home now. So we have families who are struggling. We need to bring them home.
I have a niece and nephew who got married a couple of years ago. They were both in the military. He's done a tour in Afghanistan. She's done a tour in Afghanistan. He's done one in Iraq. And they're both going back over for a second tour the end of the summer, I think. They're getting a break. They're going to be in Hawaii for a little while, but then they're
it's nice to be in Hawaii, but we see the evidence, though, that the second and third tours, how much more likely they are to come back with stress and serious psychological problems, and we're putting too much stress on them for no good reason. We've got to bring an end to this war, and we've got to get out as responsibly as we got in irresponsibly, and we've got to do it now.
The post-traumatic stress is a serious issue. I've seen it when the years I worked for the firefighters. I saw it after 9/11. I saw it at other times, and in many ways, the firefighters are better equipped to handle it than our citizen soldiers who've gone over there and seen the horrors that they're facing. We're coming to the close of this segment. Time flies when you have fun. We shall be back in 2 minutes. Stick with us. Again, my guest is Judy Fader, Democratic candidate for Congress in the 10th Congressional District of Virginia. We may have to extend this show for another 3 hours to fit in everything I want to talk about, but unfortunately I don't think the producers will let us. So we shall be back in 2 minutes.
Go to jail for a gun crime, and your family serves a sentence with you.
I'm Bob Costas, and I've been broadcasting sports for a long time. Much of what I do is ad-libbed, but still one of the most important aspects of my job is being able to write. Narrations, essays, commentaries. It's essential to express those thoughts and concepts clearly and concisely. Good writing is essential for almost any career. And with today's advanced technology, the National Commission on Writing reports that the need to write well has never been more important. Writing is everybody's business.
Sure, my neighbors Jean and Louise, They may be superheroes with superpowers, but that doesn't make them so super at saving energy and money.
Honey?
I may not be able to harness the power of the elements, but I save significant cash and help the environment with appliances, electronics, and windows featuring the Energy Star label. So discover your own energy-saving superhero. Go to ase.org/consumers.
Mom,
We got
Dad's
plenty.
making fondue again.
Talk about if you want to talk about the campaign.
Now back to the Inside Scoop, Virginia. Call in live and let your voice be heard. Here again, your host, George Burke.
Welcome back. I've told you 100 times. I'll tell you once more. My guest tonight is Judy Fader, Democratic candidate in the 10th Congressional District of Virginia, personal friend of mine, and an extraordinarily knowledgeable woman. Let's talk about the housing crisis because it's so immediate right now.
Yeah.
I don't know how it is out in the 10th, and Fairfax is weathering it fairly well, although they've still seen a tremendous jump in the numbers of foreclosures. And it's not just housing. It's the credit crunch, it's
right.
banks, it's, I think a lot of these banks are on, they're on stilts right now, and they're trying to hide the fact that they've lost so much money, and they're trying to make money any way they can, whether it's on fees or the like. But right now, the whole economy is teetering, and I personally believe Warren Buffett when he says we're in a recession. He's one of the guys I do believe. A lot of the administration people say, no, it's not a recession. A lot of the banking people say, no, it's not a recession. Warren Buffett says it is. What do we do?
Well, whatever Warren Buffett says, I think we know that people know they're hurting. Mm-hmm. And we started out talking about healthcare costs and healthcare, and that's eating up their incomes, and gas prices are eating up their incomes, mm-hmm. education, and now comes this mortgage crisis. And you ask what's going on in the 10th District. Sterling, areas around Leesburg, mm-hmm. are real hot spots for foreclosures. And it is not only affecting the people whose homes are foreclosed. Their neighbors obviously see the value of their homes decline, and their communities, the towns around them, deteriorate because there's not the economic activity that they need to thrive.
The contractors, the home improvement centers,
exactly.
I mean, right on down the line, they're all suffering.
And plain old stores, restaurants, mm-hmm. everything, everybody's suffering. So it's another place where the Bush administration has been asleep at the switch. So we were talking about failures. This mm-hmm. is another amazing failure. When we think we've seen it all, there's another one. And the Congress, including Frank Wolf, allowed this to happen. So we need action. We need action to protect home ownership and to crack down on the mortgage fraud that we've seen. We need to protect people better and protect their home ownership. And we can, and we need congressional action to do that.
One of the things that happens when you roll into a recession is even people who still are in good financial shape, people who have money, are leery of spending
yes.
it. So it snowballs.
Yes.
And it makes it even worse.
Yes. And it leads to a host of problems, as you say. It means that people are not able to borrow. We're counting on it. Mm-hmm. We're talking about in the housing area. People have been relying on the value of their homes to pay for their college educations. They're not able to do that, so it affects their education. It affects, I think, generations of families where we know that people younger than we or about our age have parents who are facing healthcare cost problems and children going to school. They are just squeezed. And we need action to bring this economy back on track.
The education is an area that always comes up in these discussions. No Child Left Behind, just the whole scope of the unevenness of education in our nation. You know, if you're in many parts of the 10th District, the 11th District, most of Northern Virginia, you have fabulous schools.
Yeah.
But you go down to Southwest and other areas, and their education system is struggling. And it's the same unevenness around the nation. What can the federal government do to, number one, strengthen education, and number two, provide guidelines that actually help us educate the scientists and the like that we need, because we're falling way behind on that.
What you're raising is that, to start with, an education, and it actually goes back to, or goes to pre-K, to very little children. We need to start it early, because education really is our ticket for economic success. And we are falling behind. And when you talk about it, there's no question we have wonderful schools in our community, but you can't talk to a teacher or a parent who is not angry and upset about what federal legislation, No Child Left Behind, is doing to their ability to teach. The idea, in theory, is to have accountability for our schools, especially for doing well by all the students in the school, the disabled and the minorities, doing well by everybody. But this law has applied a meat-axe approach. It has been very mechanical and arbitrary. It focuses on testing to the exclusion of learning. And we need to do better than that. So what we need to do is to rethink how to develop accountability that keeps teachers engaged, doesn't narrow what they can teach, that can reach all students and rely on meaningful measures. We've got to respect our teachers, whether it's their salary or their input to a quality program, and reward them for quality teaching. And we've got to invest in that pre-K. Governor Kane tried hard, but he was not able to do what he needed to do, and I believe we need federal investment in that area. Federal investment, we did not ever fund No Child Left Behind, lest we forget that. I was going to raise that
next. I'm glad you raised
that. And so if we're going to have federal involvement in accountability, we need the federal resources that make it possible to deliver.
I mean, I support the idea of making accountability in the schools, but I also believe that if you want to have a well-rounded individual who is a thinker, you have to broaden that. There's many ways to learn within the school.
Yes.
You have to make people think. You have to teach them how to make decisions and not just take tests.
That's right. And you need to focus on a broad range of subjects. It's not just the math and the science, although those are critical. It is also the music and the history and the social studies. You need a broad range of topics, and you're absolutely right. You want to teach students to think.
When I was an undergraduate in college, I originally was going to go in and get a journalism degree. My mentor and the head of the English department was a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist. He didn't allow a journalism major. His argument was, if you want to be a journalist, you have to know a little about a lot of things. So I want you to go out there and take speech criticism and art and all the, literature and all these different courses. I'm going to teach you how to be a journalist, but I want you well-rounded.
Right, but one of the lessons, I think, with No Child Left Behind is that too often policy is based on wishful thinking. So, and particularly in this administration, they have acted in ways that may sound good or have promise, but that are not based on the evidence, and the resources are not there to do the job. And in going to Congress, as I'm aiming to do, I'm bringing all that experience in working with evidence on what works and what doesn't, and building that into legislation and actually putting in place what can make a difference, whether it's education, healthcare, the war in Iraq, you name it. That's the approach that I'll bring to making policy, and I think we need it if we're going to deliver results.
We received an email from one of our viewers asking about transportation. Both Congressman Davis and Congressman Wolf were very active on the front end in scurrying around, pretending they were going to get money for Rail to Dulles. And they actually played a key role in trying to scuttle the tunnel through Tyson's. They went to the governor and said, you cannot, the governor was ready to move forward with a plan that included the tunnel, and they said, you cannot do this, you'll kill the project, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And subsequently, of course, the thing has fallen by the wayside, at least for the short term. And it seems that even though we have a Republican administration and the administrator of the Federal Transit Administration is a Republican, a political appointee, of course, that they have literally, our Republican congressmen have literally made no headway with this guy, causing one to wonder whether the whole thing on their part was a bit of a smokescreen. But, you know, certainly Governor Kane has said he's going to continue to fight to get this project funded. Others in Northern Virginia, local officials, are just as adamant about it. Where do you stand?
Well, when you talk about Republican congressmen failing us, Frank Wolf ran on bringing rail to Dulles in 1980. It was in the last 7 years, it was until the 2006 election, it was his administration, still is. It was until 2006, or the Congress thereafter, it was his Congress. Why did he not bring it to us? He should have. And I believe that it is a terrible letdown for this community. We need rail to Dulles, and we need a systematic consideration of the tunnel. It needs to be a transparent process, because we need to do this right. What I think we need, and think that Wolf failed us on terribly, is working with the federal government to make it very clear that this area is part of the nation's capital. We bring the workers in. God forbid there's a disaster, we need to evacuate. The wonderful business district that Tyson's is capable of being needs to thrive. And we need a first-class international airport. It's astonishing that we don't have rail to the airport. I believe that the federal government is responsible in part for making this happen. And as a member of Congress, I'm committed to making it happen.
That roadway that runs down the Dulles access road that runs from the Beltway to the airport, I believe, is a federal road anyway. I mean, it's dedicated, it's run by the feds, etc. You'd think that it would be in their interest to fund, you know, I think the Fed should fund this whole road. I don't think it should be funded at all by the state or local governments. Because it is an international airport that so many people who deal with the government, et cetera, use. That's never going to happen. We know that the way the formula is set up.
It is appropriate to expect the federal government to recognize a responsibility, take responsibility, not just for the rail to Dulles, but for a regional transportation system that works and making this area all that it ought to be. And that is, I think, the role of a member of Congress, and one in which I think that Frank Wolf has let us down.
One of the problems with the Bush administration is they're not big fans of rail. They want more pavement, and they'll put buses on them at best, but they just want to put more pavement.
Yeah, and I think that's what we need is a change in the transportation law. We also need a change in administrations, clearly, but we need the transportation law doles out the money for the roads, but holds back the money for the public transportation. What we need is a federal transportation policy that supports smart growth, which is what this area is working so hard to achieve. So that will take real change in Washington from the very top as we change our president and in terms of our Congress, particularly in the 10th District.
Well, you know, I view this rail to Dulles as being critically, it's important to all Northern Virginia, but to all those people who live in Warrenton and those other areas, I have friends who have businesses out there and they have to come downtown even at noontime.
Yeah.
You know what it's like coming in on 66 and the like. They could come as far as Dulles, and I'm sure there'd be extra satellite, and that's where they start hitting all the traffic. They could jump on the metro, and boom, they'd be downtown in half an hour.
Exactly, and I bet I imagine it's happened to you. I know it's happened to me, and you hear it from everyone about parents who are trying to get home after a day of work, to get home to pick up their kids. Whether to pick them up and bring them home, or to get to the soccer game or the school play, they're sitting in traffic instead of spending time with their families.
Very frustrating. We have one segment left. We'll be back with you in 2 minutes. My guest is Judy Fader, candidate for Congress.
One day, I forgot to throw away my trash after lunch, but then I saw it later when I was playing in the woods. The next week, I went boating with my grandpa, and there it was. I tried to go swimming, but I couldn't because of my trash. And when I went fishing, well, you can guess what I caught that day. So now I always throw away my trash in the garbage can, where it belongs.
1 in 8 Americans goes hungry. One idea helped change that. A community started a garden that blossomed into farmers markets. 1 in 6 children lives in poverty. One group of women found an answer by opening a daycare center that their neighbors could afford. Today, 36 million Americans live in poverty. But one by one, people are helping themselves and each other to change the picture of poverty to one of hope. For easy ways you can help, visit povertyusa.org.
Every year, 250,000 Americans are diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease.
My fellow scientists and I are working on treatments and a cure for this deadly disease.
Millions of lives are at stake. Alzheimer's disease affects 1 in 3 families.
We're committed to uncovering the mystery of Alzheimer's.
And we're not going to quit until the job is done.
To find out more about Alzheimer's disease, call 1-800-437-2423.
Only through research will a cure be found.
James, don't forget your helmet.
Will do.
Not a helmet. Your bike helmet.
Oh, okay.
Hi, I'm James Thrash with the Washington Redskins. On the football field, a helmet is an important piece of equipment. I also wear another helmet that's just as important. A bike helmet. It's the most important piece of equipment you'll have the next time you're out on your bike. Wear yours and make sure your kids do too. Safety first with the Skins.
Now back to the Inside Scoop Virginia. Call in live and let your voice be heard. Here again, your host, George Burke.
Welcome back. My guest tonight is Judy Fader, candidate for Congress from Virginia's 10th District. Judy, we've covered a lot of ground, but I've got another email from somebody who wants to hear about the environment. There's a lot of discussion these days about going green. Obviously the price of gasoline and fuel is making a big difference. It hasn't been horrible in terms of my natural gas bill this winter in terms of my heat, but my sister-in-law who lives in southern New Hampshire is paying $4 a gallon for diesel fuel. And she's spending thousands more to heat her home than she has in past years, besides all the driving, et cetera.
Yeah.
But in terms of the environment, you know, what should we be doing? What are we doing wrong, and what would you advocate in Congress that we do right? I know it's a broad question.
It is a broad question. It covers a whole host of issues because we know that our dependence on foreign oil is a big problem related to our problems in Iraq and in the Middle East, and related to our borrowing in order to support our habits. And I
saw an interesting statistic today. We produce 5% of the daily oil supply, and we use 25%.
Something is wrong with that picture, and we've had an administration that here again is where they deny reality and operate on wishful thinking and have just allowed it to keep on keeping on. So there's no question that we need a transformation of our behavior with respect to oil and our use of energy. The global warming is a major crisis, a crisis for the planet. So multiple things we need to do. We do need to work much harder on alternative sources of fuel, the whole array, solar, wind, everything that we need to invest in. We need to pull back those tax breaks to oil companies and invest in research on alternative fuels. And we can make great headway there. We need to apply the technologies that we have to be more efficient. It's taken us way too long to put in efficiency standards for autos and for appliances. We need to do that across the board. And we are making some progress. I think Al Gore did the nation and the world a real service. And although we're not working nearly fast enough, we are beginning to see movement toward limits on carbon emissions so that we really become more attentive to conservation, which we have to do. Now, our president doesn't seem to get it, but members of Congress, and especially when we elect more committed members of Congress are beginning to get it, and I believe we can do that. It's another area where our international leadership has fallen so short. We are an embarrassment under George Bush's presidency around the world.
That's for sure.
And we need to recover our leadership on the environment.
Let's go back to politics. We only have a few minutes left, so you're running for a second time in a district that has a history of that. We discussed that at the beginning of the show. Let me ask you sort of a broad question. Why are you running for a second time, and what will make a difference this time in you winning this seat?
I'm running for a second time for the same reason I ran the first time, which is to bring these voices for change in the 10th district to the Congress and to really make a difference. And we made a big dent in the first time and demonstrated that there is a real support for change in a district that is continuing to change. And what we're doing this time is building on what we did the last time. I was saying at the beginning of the show that that people are saying, I'm so glad you're running again, because we have a history of somebody running once, doing badly, and walking away. Well, I ran once, we did well, and we're coming back to finish the job. It is a job that requires the engagement of the voters of the 10th district, and I'm very pleased. One of the things that we're able to do, because we're running a longer campaign, is engage the voters early. We're already out in the field, knocking on doors, having house parties, meeting people in a way that I did not have the time because I started late in 06.
I remember that.
And the response is really quite terrific, because I think people are so committed to change.
The people often don't understand the power of incumbency that a member of Congress has. They are able to use the frank to get their message out and do it in a quote-unquote official manner. They have the power of their office and the like. So it takes a concerted effort to educate the public, to educate the
that they have an alternative. And we've talked about a host of issues where people in the 10th district, as I talk to them, feel that Frank Wolf is letting them down. We talked about, when we talk about the rail to Dulles, that he has prided himself on transportation, and they are very disappointed with the way he's behaved. We talked about environment at the global level, but they're concerned about smart growth, and we talked about federal support for smart growth to preserve our local environment. And he's not getting the federal help we need there. We saw in Loudoun County, they turned out their board of supervisors because they were in the pockets of the developers. So we're seeing again a frustration, and whether it's healthcare, the economy, all of those issues, people are unhappy and I believe ready for change. What they need to know is that I'm the woman who's ready to work with them to carry their voices to Washington, and that's what a campaign is all about.
I had the pleasure of watching you debate Frank Wolf. I think it was the League of Women Voters debate in the last cycle. And I'm not exaggerating here when I say that you cleaned his clock. You know, your range and depth of knowledge was, it was really my first view of that. I mean, certainly I'd watched you and heard you, but I got to see it in that environment and see the grasp of knowledge that you had. He was clearly outclassed and outranked even in the knowledge area, and you'd think somebody who was a member of Congress for that long would have had his act together. And he was almost imperial, as if he was perturbed that someone would even run against him.
The way I experienced it is that I looked him in the eye and held him accountable for an irresponsible war, for unaffordable health care, for failing us time and time again on issue after issue. And what is his response? He's promising the voters of this district he's going to keep on doing exactly that. And I think that they've had enough. And I think that actually that they are now ready, building on what we did before, to help us finish what we started in 06 and elect a new congresswoman from the 10th district who's going to deliver for them.
Well, the viewers should understand you do have a primary you have to get through. They have to vote for you on the 10th of June.
And I would very much appreciate people's vote on the 10th of June.
And now I'm going to ask you to spend a couple of minutes just talking directly into the camera, directly to our viewers, and tell them why they should vote for you, why they shouldn't vote for Frank Wolf. It's all yours, right here.
Well, thank you, George. I would very much appreciate your vote on June 10th and in November to bring real change to Washington. We know that we have a host of concerns and problems that we face on a daily basis, whether it is the cost of health care, the cost of gas, the cost and the value of our education, or our soldiers in Iraq. We need change in Washington. I believe that what we need is a congresswoman who is going to bring real leadership, the kind of leadership that's based on decades of working with members of Congress to deliver real results. I'm committed to doing that. I will appreciate your vote. I am working hard to win, and I will work hard to represent the voters of the 10th District and bring change to Washington.
You're a class act, and I certainly think you'd bring a great degree of knowledge to Washington. I'm going to make a commitment to you right now that once we get through this primary, and certainly all the numbers I've seen out there in the 10th looks like, I mean, you have their opponent's an admirable gentleman, etc., but it looks to me as if you'll come out of that primary in good shape, ready to run against Frank Wolf. And I'll make a commitment to you right now that if we can get him into this studio, we'll do a debate without a lot of the frivolities that some of these other debates have. I'll sit over there, you and he can sit over here and duke it out. Because
sounds good to me.
I'm confident that if you duke it out, that you'll kick his butt. I hate to be so blunt, but that's how I see it. I mean, I saw it last time. He just looked so uncomfortable throughout the process. He just did not appear to have a grasp of those issues.
Yeah. Well, he's been there 27 years, and he's become a part of the problem. He's not fighting for what we need in the 10th District, and we need a fighter with a lot of experience and energy, and I believe that I'm that woman.
Well, you certainly have the energy, and you know, we're going to be drawing to a close in a minute, but I had a recollection of you during the last campaign, and you were out there, you know, raising hell about gas prices back then when they were a good 50 cents to $1 cheaper than they are now.
That's right.
Warning that if something wasn't done, they were just going to go up further. And here we are a year later paying, by the end of this year, we'll probably be paying $4 a gallon, easily. So thank you very much for being on the show.
A pleasure.
I appreciate it. Our guest today was Judy Fader, candidate for Congress from the 10th Congressional District of Virginia. I hope you'll go to her site, which is www.judyfader.com. Check her out, and I look forward to having her on as a congressman after November. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next week.